Hello and welcome to the Royal Road School of Carmelite Prayer. We are studying the structure of man, written by Father John Emmanuel from Lyon, France, a Carmelite friar, that discusses the challenges that we face in interior prayer and what happens to us in prayer. Today we will be finishing up our study of this article by looking at the transformation of man. But the article basically is talking about what challenges we face in prayer and what happens to us in prayer. And he points out how we tend to live at the surface of ourselves, but that we actually have two dimensions, according to John of the Cross: a body, which is made up of our senses, and a spirit, which is made up of the soul and the spirit. So our body has 5 external senses and 2 internal senses. And if we look at the spiritual self, we find that our soul houses our will, our intelligence, and our memory, or what Teresa calls the faculties of the soul, the 3 faculties of the soul: the will, the intellect, and the memory. So we then looked at baptism and the theological virtues, and we saw that according to John of the Cross, God is at the center of the soul, but we have a hard time finding him there because of the many layers of attachments that we have to the world. But as we practice prayer, Christ is able to act within and actually becomes the motor of our being. At baptism, we receive the gift of the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. They are grafted into the soul, and over time, these supernatural virtues, which are actually God himself, purifies our soul and makes our soul over in his image. So today, let's look at the transformation that takes place in the soul that practices silent or Carmelite prayer. Little by little, our spiritual self is transformed by our theological life. In other words, faith, hope, and charity transform the 3 faculties of the soul: the will, the intellect, and the memory. And the spiritual self then gradually takes over the sensory self, the self that communicates with the world around us. So, in other words, our inside self, our spiritual self, comes to govern our outside self, our sensory self. The spiritual reorders both the imagination and the appetites, our 2 interior senses, for the service of good. This reorders our deepest selves. The spiritual and the sensory selves are now in harmony. This transformation makes us more harmonious beings who are more efficient, agreeable, likeable people who now live more in God's grace because God himself has transformed us. This process is simultaneously a process of developing an interior life, of being made over into the image of God. God gradually becomes the motor of our lives. We become more fully human because God is the motor of our lives and has restored order within us. we experience liberation. We are free from what has enslaved us, and we become fully human. Amen.